So every day I want to show you a little bit more about the Visual Studio IDE, or Interactive Development Environment, that was used in Visual C# 2010 Express Edition. Today I'm going to kick it off by showing you several things about the IDE. Actually, in a previous video we already noted a couple of the major areas. The Solution Explorer, the Start page that opens up whenever we initially load Visual C# 2010 Express Edition. And a little bit about the toolbar, a little bit about the menu. And in this video we want to tack on a few additional features that should help us immediately discuss the code as we continue on learning C#. So the first thing is Intellisense. Let me do this. I'm just going to get rid of this line of code by selecting it and then hitting the delete button. Now I'm going to start typing again, CO, and notice there's a couple of things that happen. Underneath where I'm typing, there's this window that pops up with a highlighted word, and as I type, a little explanation pops over, a little tooltip off to the right hand side. This little window underneath what I'm typing here is called Intellisense. So the beauty of it is there's a couple of things. First of all, it shows me what my options are and it helps me spell things correctly. The other cool thing is that if I use any delimiter, I know I'm going to hit a period after console, right? Or I could hit a space bar. But let's say I hit a period, it'll type out the entire word for me like it did just there. So I can save a lot of keystrokes. And you'll notice, as we talk about the code window in particular, that developers get very attached to their interactive development environments, to their IDEs. And they want to be much more efficient with their typing. Maybe you can think of it as laziness. I like to think about it as efficiency. But at any rate, having to only type 3 or 4 letters and then use the arrow keys on the right-hand side of your keyboard to find the class or the method that I want to use, and then just hitting the next delimiter saves a lot of time. So here again, I'm going to type fast. CON dot READ, and I'm going to use now the arrow down, and then I'm going to hit an open parenthesis, and I didn't have to type in the rest of that. And then I'm going to hit close parenthesis, and it's as easy as that to type in lines of code. So Intellisense gives you all of your options, contextually sensitive to what you're working on right now. It wouldn't show read line right here. Let me start typing read line. See, it doesn't find anything. Why not? Because it knows that you can't just call a method without calling its class. It's not in the scope. We'll talk about scope later. So if I wanted to, first of all, get to the readline method, it knows that I need some object that's within the namespaces that I've defined here at the top, the using statements, and so on. So console.read line. And there you go. The other thing is you kind of saw the tooltips already working in conjunction with Intellisense, but you can use that feature anywhere. I accidentally hovered over something right now, and we can see class system.string represents text as a series of Unicode characters. Cool. If I hover over WriteLine, gives me the method definition for WriteLine. So it's void. We'll talk about void later. Console.WriteLine. Got it. Passes in a string value. There are 18 overloads, talk about overloads later, but it writes the specified string value followed by the current line terminator to the standard output string. Huh? Okay, so tooltips aren't always extremely helpful, at least when you're getting started. It's too bad that they don't have another set of tooltips for beginners, but we'll just have to make do of this. All right, so at any rate, gives you some tips and some ideas about what it is that you're hovering over, especially helpful when you're looking at other people's code. Okay, we'll come back to this later because I'm going to use that a lot. Navigating through other people's code or your own code to find what you're looking for. All right, so the next thing is at the very bottom of the window, you can see that there's ready in the left-hand corner, prompting us and saying, okay, we can work with the IDE right now. It's not busy doing something. And then some other information off to the right-hand side, what line we are. So as I use the arrow keys on my keyboard to move up, and you can see that line number goes from 12 down to 13, down to 14, down to 15, and so on. Additionally, the column number, it shows me what column I'm currently on. And in this case, the character is aligned with the column, okay? And then also to the right of that is insert mode. You can change it up with your keyboard options depending on what keyboard option you have selected. So at any rate, some information about where you are. Again, important if somebody, say, the lead programmer on a project says we're not going past column 70, just in case we have developers that have smaller screens, and so format all your code so that it fits in within the first 70 columns. Not as important anymore, quite honestly, but still available there. Just wanted to point that out as a feature of the IDE. Okay, so line numbers are pretty important though, because when you have errors in your code, it's going to point out, what line number it's actually found on. You can see right here, line and column and so on. Another thing, whenever you're referring to code, like I'm going to do it throughout the rest of this project, I may say, hey, I know we have 100 lines of code here. Take a look at line 13, and I can highlight it, but it might be easier, especially if you're following along yourself, to look at line 13 in your own project, right? But we don't have any line numbers. How do you know other than to look over here and see that we're currently on line 13? Well, what we can do is change up some features about the main area, this code area. I'm going to go to Tools menu and select Options. And now if you go down to the text editor portion and we go to the C# option and I expand that, you can see that we have lots of options with regards to how the IDE behaves itself. One of those options are line numbers. Now you might have this deselected. I think that's the default setting. So we might only see this, and when we select it, you're like, well, I don't see what you see on your screen, Bob. Aha, that's because you need to select Show All Settings, and now you should be able to select C# and see line numbers. Awesome. So when I click line numbers and then click OK to this dialog, notice now in the left-hand column, I see line numbers. Again, the C# compiler, the .NET Framework class library, the .NET Framework runtime, all those components, they don't care about these. This is purely for us, for reference purposes, and we should use this tool as often, and I would highly recommend that you take a moment and turn that on in your own IDE. Okay, so there are other options that we can set as well. If you don't like the default font, which I generally never change these sorts of things, but if you have a reason why you need a larger font, what you can do is go back to the Tools, Options menu, and then go to Environment, and I believe down here Fonts and Colors, and we can change the default size to a 12-point font. We can change the color, the background. You know, some people nowadays love to change up the colors from white background to black, and then from the item foreground, let's just go white, and then click OK. And so it's definitely a different look. Some claim that it's easier on the eyes. Honestly, not for me. I'm going to go back. Old habits die hard, and I've been doing this for a while, and, well, I just like my white background with my black text. Back to normal. Phew. Okay. But you can make those changes if you want to. I like the 12-point font, especially since in the screencast, I notice sometimes the definition for some of the words don't come out quite well. I think I'll leave it at 12-point. Hopefully it'll be easier to read. And if we have too much space over here, then I can always make it smaller. Okay, the next thing is that there's this little blocks here on the right hand side that correspond with the blocks of code. So we have this little block of code. We noticed in the previous video that it's a method. We can roll that method up and kind of get it out of the way. Again, in a simple example like this, not that important. It's easy for us to find what we're looking for. We only got, 16 lines of code, and 15 of those are really pretty templated. But when you have hundreds or thousands of lines of code and you need to navigate through them, sometimes it's nice to roll things up and get it out of the way. What you can do is hover over the ellipses and see a snapshot of what the code is that's rolled up underneath those ellipses. All right. Also, it kind of gives you this new thing, I think, in Visual Studio 2010, where you hover over it and you can see exactly what it is that's going to be rolled up by the highlighting. It's a very light gray, light bluish gray area that's combined, and that's again just helpful for rolling up. Okay, and the final thing I'm going to show you about the text part of the IDE for today is the tracking changes. visually, how can you see that you've made changes to the file and now you need to save your changes? If we were to crash right now, what would happen to all the source code that we wrote? All right, we only wrote a line or two of code in the last, hour or so. But what if we wrote dozens or hundreds of lines of code? We don't want to lose that. As a visual reminder, as a cue to say to us, hey, you need to save, you can look at two places. The first is this little asterisk next to the file name in the tab of the current item that we're working with, or with any of the tabs that are displayed in the main area. The second sign to us that we need to save is the little yellow lines. You see there are green lines and yellow lines. The yellow lines mean we need to save. The green lines mean we're fine, we're saved. So it's a way of tracking changes. I'm going to click Save All, and you'll notice that the asterisk goes away in the file name in the tab, and then also we have all green lights in our left-hand column. Okay, so that does it. Again, every day I'm going to try and show you a little more tips and tricks with the Visual Studio IDE. Helps you be more efficient in navigating through your code, and visual cues to know what the state of the code is and how to type more efficiently using shortcuts like the Intellisense and the delimiters, and using, as we hover over certain keywords and seeing the tooltips that pop up. All those things are very important. You'll use those throughout your tenure as a software developer. So I'm glad to present those pretty early on in the learning process to you. Okay, so we'll pick back up with C# in the next video. Thank you.